the distance I could see the town where I was born. It's gonna be a long walk home. Yeah, pretty darling, don't wait up for me. Gonna be a long walk home.
For me, the Lion's long walk home from Wellington to Raumati day one, ironically enough, will start with a train trip from Waikanae to Wellington, taking a little under an hour, which is no big deal. And therein lies the problem. We are all so used to travelling to and from Wellington by car, train or bus that contemplating the idea of undertaking the 50-kilometre journey by foot over several days is not something many of us do. This sense of blasé is compounded by the fact that the trip is over well-established and familiar roads and railways, seldom taking much more than an hour, and you always have a car, bus or train protecting you from the weather. For the 7,000 people doing the Kapiti to Wellington commute each weekday, contemplating a homeward trip by foot, let alone after a major Wellington earthquake, is rare. Does it ever cross your mind that when you're driving to Wellington that you might not actually be able to drive out again?
No, I've got to admit, you don't tend to think of it. Nobody likes to think of the worst case scenario, really.
Or have you ever thought about the possibility that you might not be able to come back, that you might actually be trapped in there?
No, I take it for granted. I've done it so many times, I just expect to be able to return.
The recent earthquakes in Wellington, however, got the people at Lions thinking, and the Lions Long Walk Home project was born. In Programme 1, we looked at earthquakes and how they come about. Then we learnt about grab bags and why you really need to grab one.
A grab bag is something you keep under your desk or under your bed with all the basic essentials that you would need if you need to literally grab and go.
Having done the 50-kilometre Lions Long Walk Home from Wellington to Raumati, which we will hear about in Programme 3, I can tell you that a little preparation goes a very long way. In this programme, we are quite literally going to start from the bottom and work our way up. Because if I'm going to walk 50 kilometres on foot, my feet are going to be very important and potentially very sore, so they deserve some attention. Timothy Sanders is a podiatrist and he is going to educate us about Down Under. I'm not going to walk barefoot, although one lady did do the walk in sandals. Thus Jim McIntosh, a cobbler for over 30 years, is going to tell us about shoes and how vital they are. He will also point out what to look for in a good quality pair of shoes and why cheap is not always good. Next, we will move up to the clothes and other items that we will need on the trip. And as promised, we are going to end the program at the top by looking at the head, or more precisely, what should be going on inside it.
I'm not going to just talk, I'm going to walk this way. Righto, packs on, rifles at the ready, let's go.
Follow us on this journey of discovery, as it may just prove to be of help to you, should you ever need to walk from Wellington to Kapiti, even though, of course, we all know it won't happen to you.
Wellington and Blenheim have been rocked by a magnitude 5.7 earthquake this morning that GeoNet's described as severe.
This program was created for Coast Access Radio with support from the Lions, Civil Defence and Kapiti, Jim McIntosh, Timothy Sanders, Andrew and Daniel Penman, Tom Rolton, Penman and New Zealand On Air. It was produced by Jack Penman.
This story will swell with pride the feet of every true Englishman, woman, child, cat, dog, chicken, mongoose.
Given the task at hand, we will start from the bottom up. Yes, we are going to learn about feet.
The human skeleton has 206 bones, of which 52, or about a quarter, are in your feet. 28 are in your toes. Each foot has 26 bones, 33 joints, over 100 muscles, and 125,000 sweat glands.
The average person loses about a cup of moisture a day through more than 250,000 sweat glands in their feet. The skin on your feet is thicker than it is anywhere else on your body.
There are more nerve endings per square centimetre in the foot than any other part of the body, which explains why there's so many variations of torture involving the feet.
The average stride for men is 78 centimetres and 70 centimetres for women.
Over an average lifetime of 80 years, a pair of feet will make about 7,500 steps per day, or 216,262,500 steps in total. They will carry their owner over 180,000 kilometres, or about 5 times round the earth.
It is rare that a pair of feet is the same size. Usually, one is bigger than the other.
Standing in one spot is far more tiring than walking. The reason for this is that demands are being made on the same few muscles for a length of time.
Now that we have the basics, there are some things we need to know about our feet before we take them, or rather they take us, on a 50-kilometre walk. And here to help us is Dr. Timothy Sanders, a podiatrist based in Wellington. Tell me, what does a podiatrist do?
The podiatrist is a specialist trained at university, 4-year degree in the medical and some non-medical issues and problems regarding to the foot, knee down pretty much.
A sore foot on a walk to the dairy or shop is no big deal. But when you have to cover 50 kilometres over rough terrain and in potentially bad conditions, sore feet are the last thing you need. So first, let us look at what can go wrong, and then what we can do about it.
Blister? Yeah, a little bit of a blister sort of slash.
It'll definitely be for a blister.
The worst part of the body were the blisters on the feet.
Oh, you've got blisters?
Yeah.
All I need, maybe some Band-Aids as well for the blisters.
Fine, except they gave me a blister.
We've all heard about blisters, and chances are you have had one. But what actually is a blister, and why do we get them? Dr. Timothy Sanders.
Blister is pretty much the inability of the skin to respond to a stress upon it. So if you have friction, you rub your skin for a period of time, your skin has a normal elasticity in it, which will move with that friction. But if that continues over a long period of time, then the little skin layers will separate, and so as soon as they separate, you'll get fluid build up amongst them.
So basically a blister is just a portion of skin that's separated, like perhaps a sticker on a magazine or a layer of paint.
Same thing. So if you get a lot of friction, that epidermis will separate between itself and fluid will rush into it to try and cure that or put it together. It's a normal protective fluid that the body produces.
And so it sees that the skin's become detached and it tries to fill up the gap to make it better.
Pretty much, yeah, in a very simple way. It's very sterile, and the best way to deal with it is to cover it and protect it rather than trying to pop it.
Oh, you have no idea the solutions people came up with involving needles and knives and things, and I said, no, I'm not doing minor surgery on a walk.
Well, people have to remember that it's a very sterile and healthy environment. As soon as you pop it and introduce air to it or excrete that fluid, you're going to introduce a very big potential for infection. I used to just get a bit of tape and just tie it down reasonably firmly, just over the top of it with a normal tape just to protect it. Vaseline's sometimes used just to decrease some of the friction that's been caused by the footwear.
Okay, let's say that I'm 4 hours into the walk out of Wellington, it's raining, it's pouring, and I've got this blister and it bursts, or the skin starts to come off. What's the best way to deal with a blister that's the skin's already started to come off?
I would tend to put a really good adhesive pad on it, a Telford type dressing, and a good piece of tape that's going to firmly hold that to your foot.
But you still leave the skin on, you don't try and take the skin off?
I would not take the skin off at all, because you'll find yourself in all kinds of rawness and soreness. And
possibility of infection, presumably, as well.
Yes, that's right.
An unpleasant surprise that awaited many on the walk was the realization that the nice-fitting pair of shoes they had in the morning have become an uncomfortable and ill-fitting pair by the afternoon. The cause? Swelling.
If you increase your cardiovascular status, your heart starts pumping harder, it will pump more fluid to your feet. And not always does the foot or your leg have the ability to take away the byproducts from that, and so your feet will swell up.
So when you say fluid, is that blood or some other fluid?
Blood goes to the foot from the heart, and blood is used for takes oxygen and nutrients to your muscles and your bones. But that always, like everything, has a byproduct of a waste product, fluid that does not need, and that is a fluid water that needs to be excreted. And that's done so by two ways, through gravity and also through the action of your muscles in your legs. But sometimes, particularly when you start fatiguing, the muscles can't keep up with the amount of blood that's been pumped down there.
And the amount of waste products that are being generated.
Yeah, and that's right. So there will be some build-up. It's a very normal thing, and generally once people have rested after their activity, the fluid will catch up and get taken away anyways.
Now that we know more about our amazing feet and what can go wrong, we need to discover how to reduce the chances of trouble down under. And it is no surprise that shoes are at the top of the list.
The very first thing I always tell people, runners, those people who come to see me, you must get a correct fitting footwear. It is most important that your type of foot fits the type of shoe that's appropriate for the terrain.
Cheap shoes are great for day-to-day activities and represent value for money. The problem is, a 50-kilometre walk over rough terrain is not, well, for me anyway, a day-to-day activity. Having done the walk myself, you may want to resist the temptation of cheap shoes. They may sound like a good idea for what is a one-off event that may not even happen, but beware.
I also know many people that I deal with, patients that go to the number one warehouse or a warehouse for their sport shoes, and they play sport and they run long distances and do this, and they have no trouble with it. And I think the key to them, they tell me, is the fact that they know that while they're going to pay, a quarter of the price for a pair of running shoes, they also know that its chances are they're going to throw them out in a quarter of the time than they might a good quality pair of shoes.
Whereas if you were going to do like walking over debris, rubble and so forth, going from Wellington to Waikanae, you probably wouldn't want to wear a pair of shoes like that. Even if the walk was only 20 hours, they probably wouldn't be very good.
I certainly wouldn't be using one pair. I'd be wanting 3 or 4 pairs probably.
Which is going to make for a big grab bag.
Great little backpack.
Yeah, it's better to just get a decent pair of shoes in the first place, run them in, and then put them in your grab bag. Do not underestimate how important a good thick pair of socks are. They form a protective layer between your shoes and feet. Thick socks also help to keep your feet warm and comfortable. In fact, thick woolen socks are ideal, as wool is a very good insulator, but it also allows the feet to breathe, and it keeps your feet warm even when wet, and it is a sturdy natural material that lasts a long time. In short, wool is not just good for fishermen. So for me, a couple of pairs of good woolen socks make sense. Another tip: when you go to get a new pair of shoes, wear a thick pair of socks as well as your normal socks. These allow room for natural swelling in your feet. Alternatively, get your new shoes in the afternoon when your feet have naturally swelled.
Big old Bruce wore moisturizer. He was the biggest man in town, built like a big old cement truck, skin like the softest part of a duck.
Yes, you can believe your ears. Applying a good moisturizer to your feet before a long walk like this is a very good thing, as it helps to lubricate your feet and reduces the chances of getting blisters. What are some other things we can do to prepare our feet for this long walk?
Get your footwear sorted out first. Ensure that's really good, and then you would want to probably make sure that the actual walk itself is very, very well planned. So we spoke about footwear and hosiery. If you hadn't done a whole lot of training, I mean, most of us, if we have a real determination, can in fact go and do a walk like that. It might take a lot longer than those that have trained. And I know my mum can do it, could do it. She's got a wonderful determination if she wants to do something.
Yeah.
But she's very clever in that she would make sure that she has a really good support team in the plan. So every 10K, she would be stopping, having water and nutrients, and probably, if I know my mum, she would change to a second pair of shoes and a new pair of socks. And the other thing, the importance, of course, is continual nutrition. That is important for your feet as anything.
So to keep things happy down under, we need to have a good quality pair of shoes and run them in. Try to avoid using cheap shoes on the basis that the walk may never happen, because if it does, you'll be very sore. If you can, a second pair of shoes in your grab bag is also a good idea. Wear thick socks and keep a couple of pairs spare. Apply a moisturizer to your feet before you start. Don't worry about a little swelling. It is natural. Again, make sure your shoes are properly fitted. Blisters are caused by persistent rubbing on the skin, so the best way to avoid them is to have good shoes, thick socks, and moisturizer. If you do get a blister, do not poke, prick, or lance it. Leave it alone. Apply good plaster or some tape to protect it and leave it. If your blister does burst, do not remove the skin or go poking around. Simply disinfect it and protect it with a plaster or tape. Planning. Sounds simple, but in reality it is vital. For example, if you have friends you can stop by along the way, make them part of your plan. More on that later. If you look after your feet, they will look after you. And speaking of looking after your feet, to do this we really need a good pair of shoes. But what is a good pair of shoes, and how can we tell? Well, what better way to find out than to speak with a man who has spent more than 30 years making them by hand. Jim McIntosh is a cobbler, and he is going to teach us about shoes.
Cobble and I cobble away. Good morning. I'm a cobbler, you know.
Really? I could have sworn you were a Nubian chicken sexer.
There is a resemblance, I must agree.
Before meeting Jim and doing the walk, my solution to the shoe problem would have been to get a pair of cheap shoes, put them in a plastic bag and store them away in my grab bag. As it turns out, this is not such a good idea. So first of all, Jim describes his ideal pair of shoes for a walk like the one we are going on. And as luck would have it, he has made them last year for a trip around Europe and is wearing them today.
They're all leather, uppers and linings. They have a bit of body or depth to the sole and a compromise between flexibility but a rigidity about them, so that you're not feeling all the rocks and pebbles through your soles, but you have enough give in the sole to actually compress down over the rocks to give you grip. Yeah, these were designed specifically to wear around Europe to give a functional walking shoe for walking on cobblestones, which are quite difficult to walk on for many hours, very, very tiring on the feet. So the type of shoe you need is something that's got a bit of thickness between and a rigidity between you and the ground with plenty of grip.
So he's taking one off, and it's got at the heel the sole is at least an inch thick, maybe a little bit more, and at the ball of the foot it's probably about, what, 3/4 of an inch?
Yeah, they have a shaped footbed inside. A good shoe doesn't have to be, the insole doesn't have to be overly supportive. A good shoe needs the heel seated in a concaved cup.
Before you go out and start making your own shoes, there is an easier way. You could go and buy a pair of cheap walking shoes and store them in your grab bag, safe in the knowledge that should the dreaded event occur, you will be ready. Don't, because like people, not all shoes are created equal. If I had shoes like normal, good walking shoes, you might last the first day, but chances are, like I brought some examples here, the sides get torn or the soles. I don't know how well the soles would hold up, but I can just imagine them becoming very uncomfortable very quickly, especially if they're brand new.
Yeah, if they're cheap shoes, and also if you're wearing them in constantly and it happens to be raining,
yeah,
they may actually fall to bits very quickly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So basically the combination of high use and wetness, and by high use we're talking like 2 or 3 hours, constant tromping.
The average cheap shoe you buy probably wouldn't stand it. It's these days that most shoes are made to last 6 months.
Really?
That's how they're engineered.
So they basically deliberately figure that if you get 6 months, and is that why they're so cheap?
Yes.
And so the part of them that would fail is what, the glue?
It can be the materials that fail.
Yeah.
The very cheap shoes will have a sole which looks substantial, but more cavity than actual material.
And they're quite light as well, aren't they? I've noticed that. You see some of these shoes and the soles look very thick, and then you pick it up and there's almost nothing there.
Yeah, well, the walls of those soles may only be 2 or 3 millimetres thick.
So in actual fact, there's every chance that the soles of those shoes are actually mostly air.
Exactly, yeah. Well, all soles are eventually cemented on, glued on. Yeah. But a good shoe the soles will stay on. The cheaper shoes, generally the sole is stuck to a synthetic upper, and it will be the synthetic upper that fails. The adhesive of the sole will stick to the synthetic upper.
Yeah.
But the material itself fails, and the adhesive peels away a layer of upper material. So it's not the adhesive failing, it's the material failing.
Do not despair, as there is no need to go out and spend $250 on a new pair of shoes, only to leave them locked up in a grab bag.
Yeah, but the thing is, you don't need to buy a special pair of expensive shoes for your grab bag. What you should be doing is saying, I have a good pair of Nike and Reeboks here. They're well worn in. I'm going to put those in the grab bag and buy myself a new pair.
Yeah.
Right.
So they might be the ones that you've worn for a couple of years. They're still okay. The soles are there, but you just feel like getting a new pair.
Yeah, but they're well worn in.
Yeah.
They fit well.
Having your shoes well worn in is a very important point, which can catch out even the most experienced people.
Well, the mistake I made when I went to Europe is that my shoes weren't worn in enough. And when I got there, because of all this pounding of pavements and sweat build-up and your feet swell a bit, I got blisters.
How long would it take you to run in a pair of shoes properly?
Oh, look, a good for to be totally comfortable and without any fear of getting blisters, if you're going to do a long walk, a couple of months, not just 2 weeks.
Now we need to know what to look for in a good quality pair of shoes. And do not forget to bring a pair of thick socks to the shop so you can make sure to allow for the natural swelling of your feet.
You're looking for a robust shoe, preferably with plenty of leather in it.
Yes.
Leather uppers, leather linings, a good sole with a compromise between flexibility and rigidity, so that if you're on a whole lot of rocks, you're not going to feel everything through your feet.
Okay, so if you're looking at a pair of shoes and just bend them over, say, your knuckles or something like that, and if they just mould around really, really easily, they're probably not so good.
No good at all.
Yeah, whereas you want some that if you try and mould it around your knuckles, it's going to give a reasonable amount of resistance, but not a huge amount.
Yeah. Some soles are very, very hard wearing,
but
they're very hard and they don't grip so well.
Okay.
Right, and particularly on wet surfaces, on, say, a smooth, rounded stone.
Yeah.
And a very soft sole will grip very well,
Yeah.
but it doesn't wear very well.
So you're probably looking for a sole that's quite grippy, like a tyre perhaps, rather than smooth.
It has some give to it.
Let me tell you a tale.
And now for a cautionary tale for all the squirrels out there.
I had a lady come in with 5 pairs of shoes of a popular brand with polyurethane soles. Oh, Mr. McIntosh, they're all falling apart. Look at the soles. And I've only worn 1 pair. And I found these lovely, comfortable shoes. And so I bought 5 pair of them, expecting to wear 1 pair. And then when they were worn out, I'd go and get another pair and wear that. And then another one. And they would last me 10 to 20 years. But look at them. I only bought them 3 years ago. And they're all falling apart. The polyurethane soles are cracking up.
That's just gone. Yeah, okay. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's just it.
That's it.
How extraordinary.
But it's a biodegradable plastic.
So I guess that's
which is
good.
Desirable.
Yeah. So when it goes in the landfill, it actually
degrades.
Polyurethane is ideal for making shoe soles as it is flexible, hard-wearing, and biodegrades, which is good for the environment, but not so good for grab bags. In general, The polyurethane in shoes begins to break down after about 4 or 5 years, and to make matters worse, it turns out that extended periods of disuse can actually accelerate the deterioration process. And just because you went out and spent several $100s on an expensive pair of tramping boots, don't assume you are safe, because it is the very properties of polyurethane that see its use in many high-end work and tramping boots. So if you have come across a pair of your old shoes or boots that you thought should have plenty of life in them, but instead find them a crumbly mess, the breakdown of polyurethane is probably the cause. So don't just assume that that lovely pair of expensive shoes in your grab bag you bought all those years ago are still okay. Go and check them. To summarise what we've learnt so far, shoes are very important. Don't treat them as an afterthought. Resist the temptation of cheap shoes. They may seem like a good idea, especially as they are destined to live in a grab bag. Don't. Instead, either buy a pair of good quality shoes and run them in for at least 2 months and put them into your grab bag. Or, if this seems like a waste, use them until they are about 2/3 of the way through their life and then put them in the grab bag. Either way, you will end up with a pair of reliable and comfortable shoes in your grab bag. When you go shoe shopping, keep the following in mind. Take a pair of thick socks for fitting and wear them over your normal socks. You will need to allow for the swelling of your feet. A good pair of shoes should fit well and feel comfortable to walk in. The uppers should be good quality, leather is ideal. The soles should provide good grip like that of a car tyre when you run your hand over it. They should not be too stiff or too flexible. You should meet with some resistance when you bend them around your fist. The thickness of the sole should be about 1 inch at the heel and not be full of cavities. Make sure the inner soles have a cup for the heel so it is well supported, and run them in for at least 2 months.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
Now that we know about our feet, shoes, and some of the things that can go wrong with both, it is time to look at the rest of the stuff we will probably need. There are 2 ways to approach this. The first is the classic armchair method, in which you sit at home and try to imagine all of the things you're going to need on a 50-kilometre walk. This is the simpler method, but seldom matches reality. The second is the thinking of all the things that you really wish you had while you are actually doing a 50-kilometre walk. And an extension of this method is the equal amount of thinking that ends up going into all the unnecessary items that you are now lugging along in your backpack. This is by far the most accurate method, although it is a little onerous. Luckily for you, I and 100 others have already used this second technique, and all you need to do is listen to the next few programs to get the benefits. Suffice to say that you probably don't need a lot of the things you have packed, and will be surprised by the seemingly trivial items that you left behind, and now would sell your own mother for. Pair of nail clippers, anyone? Unless you're a bear, you will need some clothes. The problem is that people commuting to work in Wellington tend not to wear the kind of clothes that are suitable for walking out of Wellington. Another issue is the size of your grab bag. How big is too big? Once again, we will learn more about this during the walk in Program 3. But for now, a basic guide is that you will want to keep warm and dry. So at the very least, you should have a warm top, ideally one that will still keep you warm if it gets wet. And you need a raincoat that will keep you dry without wearing you down. Finally, you'll need a plan. If there is one thing that I've learned from doing the walk for real, it is that you will be surprised by just how different things look when you're using your legs and not wheels to make the journey. Well, that is it for now. In Program 3, I and about 100 others are actually going to do the walk. So come along and follow our progress. Learn from our mistakes and help yourself to get ready. You never know when it will be your turn.